This is Karen Stevens. I'm Karen Stevens conducting an oral history interview with Erica Hague on Monday, June 6, 2017 for the Georgia State Women's...
June 12th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
June 12th. And this is being recorded for the Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. Before we talk, Erica, about your experiences regarding the Women's March, I'd like to get a little biographic information about you. What year were you born?
I was born in 1987.
Where?
I was born in Lexington, Kentucky.
Really? How did you get here from Lexington, Kentucky?
So my parents were both born in Kentucky as well. My dad works in banks, so we moved for his job up to Ohio. While I was an undergraduate at Purdue University in Indiana, they moved to Atlanta for his job. When I finished undergrad in 2009, I went to Wilmington, North Carolina for graduate school. And while I was finishing up my thesis there, I moved back home and graduated from there in 2012. So I've been in Atlanta since around 2012, I guess.
Okay. What about your family's political leanings? Growing up, were you aware of that?
Not really. My parents had a really big argument before I was born about politics, and it's not really been super discussed at my household, so I was never really a political person growing up. My parents, I would sort of label them, I guess, from an outsider's perspective, right? Like not asking them what they are. But I would say that they're fiscally conservative for sure. But beyond that, it sort of depends. I think that they're not sticking to one party or another, but I would say that they're probably lean more towards the Republican side, unfortunately.
What's your profession?
I am a public historian, so I work at the Atlanta History Center as the collections manager here, and that is sort of a dream job of mine, so that was pretty cool. I like it a lot. I take care of the collections items and help rotate exhibits, maintain paperwork on all of the collection pieces, and do loan paperwork, all that sort of stuff.
Okay. What political party do you support?
So I am not affiliated with either party. Since I was not, growing up, I was not really into politics. I hated discussing politics because it just seemed just not worthwhile, because they're both sides are pretty smarmy. But at the same time, I think that if I were to sort of assign myself to any party, it would probably be either like the Green Party or Democratic, because both of them have things that they talk about or they support that I am also in support of. For me, it's a lot of the human rights issues as well as environmental issues that are really important, and I think that those get overlooked a lot in when we start talking about other issues that are related to politics, like civil defense and stuff like that, which is important, but in the large scale of things, I think that environment is probably a little bit more important.
Have you participated in the past in any political activities?
I voted. That's about it. So the Women's March was actually the first demonstration that I was ever part of. Yeah.
Why did you decide to march on January 21st?
Yeah. Following the night that we watched, I watched solo, I guess, but me and my friends were texting back and forth the whole night about where the polls were at with Election Day. I have a knit morning. I have a group of friends that are all in their late 20s, early 40s that we get together on Sunday mornings and we knit, and that's what we do. That's sort of our zen spot.
Crochet?
Knit.
Knit.
We all crochet and knit, but most of us are knitting at the knit morning. And when the Sunday after election night, we got there, and I said, I saw this thing on Facebook. And one of my friends, Jess Pater, she said, I saw it too. Want to get on the bus? And so we actually signed up that morning, for bus 2 from Atlanta, and we got, I think, about 8 of our friends to go on the bus with us.
So which march did you attend?
We attended the Washington, D.C. march.
Why did you choose that one in particular?
For me, it felt really important to go to the Capitol and be a part of the larger march there, to represent the South, especially since people have a tendency to sort of think that everyone down here is very conservative, and I think that that's not the case. So I thought that it was important, since I was fiscally able to go, to do that, and riding the bus actually was a much more affordable way to go for me. So that was a good thing.
So that's how you got to the march.
Yes. So we signed up for the buses pretty early on. We were on bus 2. I think there were 6 buses from Atlanta that ended up going. So we signed up for the bus through Skedaddle, I think. That was arranged by another woman that lives in Georgia. And there's a whole group of people that were organizing that for Georgia, actually.
What is Skedaddle?
Skedaddle is a bus company, and so they arrange for different buses to, like, the charter bus system. So you would go on their website or go through their app, and you could sign up for a bus seat. And as the bus filled, once it got past a certain point, it was verified as it was going. And then it would just, the seats just got cheaper and cheaper as the bus filled up. So that was sort of nice. That once we had a full bus, I think it was only about $70. They all provided coupons too, Skedaddle did, for everyone that was riding that bus could put that coupon on, and everyone that was going to the Women's March actually was able to use that coupon if you're chartering a bus through Skedaddle, so that was nice.
Let's go back for just a minute as to why you wanted to go. What was the issue that was most important to you?
I felt that Donald Trump was not supportive of anything that I stood for. I think that he doesn't respect women. He doesn't respect anyone that is not fiscally capable of supporting themselves. And I don't think that he really gives a damn about anyone but himself. I see him as very self-focused and just not a very nice person. My parents, whenever I got into this argument with them prior to election, would always claim that they don't like Hillary because of things that have happened in the past, either Benghazi or just her husband's political leanings and what he did when he was in the White House. And I didn't understand why they couldn't separate that out from her, because to be judged against what your spouse has done is just completely, doesn't make sense to me. She is her own person. So a lot of that, I feel like, especially on my father's side when he would talk about this, was just genderist, sexist things that he would say, which really bothered me. And after the election, I felt like I was sort of justified in thinking that, as him and other parts of my family continued to get worse and worse with saying racist and sexist things in public, and that was not how they talked before. And so it's been a real struggle to call them out on it. But yeah, so all of those things are one of all of that feeling that he sort of put out, Donald Trump puts out into the world, these negative feelings and this way that people can, I say these things in public, so it's okay for other people to say these things in public. And it's not okay. And it's not okay to think them either. I think that it's just very mean-spirited. But all of those reasons were reasons why I felt that it was important to march. I am very privileged I'm going to say that right now. I'm very privileged to be able to go, that I had time, that I had money, that I didn't have another person that I had to, care for, that I could go. So I felt that it was important that I be there since I could. But yeah.
Were your family supportive or indifferent, or what about you going?
So,
did they know?
They did know. My mother was very worried about me. She thought that this was going to be dangerous. I never for one moment thought it was going to be dangerous. I knew it was going to be a big event. I knew that there was going to be a lot of people there, but I knew that they would all be in support of us. So I think that that's something that I understood better than her. It was kind of discongruous because she's also the person that picked me up from the bus and dropped me off at the bus stop to get on the bus, even though she herself voted for Donald Trump. And we had a large argument where I didn't talk to her for about a week after that, because I could not understand why she, as a woman, could support a man so reprehensible. So we had several arguments about it. But when I came back on the bus, she was cheering, and I just felt that that was sort of, I don't know why she was cheering. So it was sort of emotional, but I still don't know how to have that conversation with her. So we'll see how it goes.
Describe, back to the trip.
Yeah.
Describe the group that you traveled with. How did y'all come together?
So I was actually the bus captain for bus 2, which I didn't know that I was going to be the bus captain until about 36 hours before we left. When they had us sign up for the tickets, and they had us do this whole Google form and say, if you wanted to be a bus captain, and I said, maybe, I don't know what that entails, but if you need me, I'm there. I'm always sort of a person that I'll step up if you need me to, but I'm also fine with just being one of the crowd. That's fine. So they had posted on Facebook that they needed someone for certain buses because they had never gotten to the point where they assigned people for those buses, or the people that they had assigned had, for some reason, they weren't going to do it anymore. So I signed up. I said, sure, I'll be bus captain. I had no idea what that entailed. They gave me very little information. It was kind of disorganized, I'm not going to lie, but when you're organizing a busload of 80 people times 6, it's kind of crazy. Actually, there probably weren't 80 people on their bus. There's probably only about 50 or 60. My group that I went with directly was about 8 ladies. They're all from my knit groups, either the Sunday morning one, or I have another one on Friday nights that I go to, and we all knit hats, and it's sort of like us, and then we had a coworker of one of us, and then one of our other knitters wasn't able to go, but her niece was coming, and so she came with us. One of my old coworkers was on the bus, and her boyfriend. It was a huge gaggle of ladies and gents on the bus together, and it was really fun. It was very jovial. We were kind of disorganized. I was the first bus captain that I know of that was actually at the Home Depot over in front of Ponce City Market to try to organize people, and we sort of organized into bus groups and waited for the buses. The buses were late. Lots of people were hour early or more, so lots of people standing around in a parking lot, so it looked kind of shady. But once the buses came, we got loaded up, snacks were passed out, and we just did a rundown. I tried to prepare people for what to expect. Lots of folks didn't know what the march was going to be like, where it was. They just knew to get on the bus. So we had, I made up this little half-sheet pamphlet that had a map on one side of the map route that had been released the day before, or the day that we left, I guess, so I popped that in there. And then my contact information and information about where to go if, because we had a meetup point for Georgia members at a local park in case things went wrong, to go to this park, and we would reorganize from that point.
Park up at Washington.
Yes, it was in DC, yeah. So this is once we had gotten there, if you were in the march and you had some sort of problem, or if the march itself was somehow disrupted, that was our fallback point, right? So our safe spot. So thankfully that never had to be used, but we had that just in case. So it was good. So we all got on the bus. I checked everyone in. I did a little spiel. We got on the road. It was a pretty long bus ride. We got there a little bit late, but we all got there from Atlanta, I guess, all the Atlanta buses. We used, I think it was called Fire Chat, which is a Bluetooth-enabled app. So it doesn't use Wi-Fi and it doesn't use your cell phone signal. It uses Bluetooth, and we thought that that would be a better way of contacting people while in the crowd, because we expected cellular issues, which were an issue. So all of the bus captains were on this. We also had a Facebook group to try to post photos and just make sure that we're all connected and we all knew where each other were. It didn't work so great because once we got there, a lot of the bus groups got separated out. So we didn't really get to march together as a group. But I had my group of about 8 of us, and then I think we had about 4 or 5 other people that were on our bus that had came by themselves. And they said, I'd like to walk with someone. And I said, you're more than welcome to join my group. We already have 8 folks, and we'd be more than happy to walk with you in this journey. So we had about 12, 13 people all together, I guess. And I was usually on one end because I had a big sign, and my friend Jess Pater, again, had another sign that she had. It was the symbol for woman, the Venus symbol. And so if you knew where those 2 signs were, you knew that you were sort of in the right area for our group.
What did your sign say?
We put the pro in protest, and it had pro-environment, pro-LGBTQ, pro-feminism, all the pros that I am. I thought that that was really important to be positive, because I feel like there were a lot of negative signs, and while it's really easy to think, fuck Trump, just fuck him, at the same time, I feel like that's not going to engage in conversation with anyone. They're automatically going to say, you don't want to listen to me. And so I think that it's more important, especially today, to try to build lines of communication. Like, we are both pro-environment, and let's talk about what we can do for the environment and see where we can build off of from there. Because if you have a commonality with someone, I think that that makes it easier to start a conversation. Like, hey, we both like the color blue. Even if it's something that simple, then it can branch off from there. So.
Did you see people who were against the march while you were marching?
We passed by a group of people closer to the march that were doing like a counter demonstration, but there weren't a lot of them, and honestly we just sort of ignored them. I thought that that was the best way to just walk by and not give them any sort of notice. We saw a lot of, so we walked from the bus, which was parked at the stadium, down to the march, and it was like 1.5 miles, I think, a little bit over a mile. And honestly, that was probably the perfect way to start. I think that a lot of people that took the subway, or the metro tube, whatever they call it, they had a different experience because they were surrounded by people that were also going, and we were too, but we also got all of the homes. DC's very liberal, which is great. And we passed so many people that were outside their homes offering to let us in to use the bathroom, handing out snacks, handing out water, cheering, waving signs, things like that. Lots of folks had signs up in their yard. It was just very welcoming, and I think that that was the perfect start to seeing how excited they were that we were here in the city to make things better.
How did that feel?
It felt really good. Like, I think that even though there is a pretty large liberal contingent in Atlanta, especially, you don't always see it, right? Some people, if you go to certain neighborhoods, aren't very welcoming, regardless of, what you look like. But these people didn't care, like, who you were, what your background was. I mean, they were excited for you to be here. They were excited for it to happen and the march to happen. And they really just wanted to be welcoming, so.
Could you talk a bit about the atmosphere of the march?
Yeah. The march itself or getting to the march?
Both.
So getting to the march, it was sort of like when you are going to a sporting event and you're all sort of flooding together, right, from like all of these different like parking lots or areas where you're coming in from, and you're all just sort of flooding into the same space. So you very much feel like sort of like a sheep. You're being herded towards the same space. But it was good. Lots of people were walking. We were all chanting on the way there. We were cheering. We got to the Capitol at one point, and we came in from the back of the Capitol because how the stadium is. That's how we walked. When we got to the Capitol, there was some booing. There was people taking photos. We took a group photo in front of the Capitol, and lots of people just doing selfies, things like that, live video chats, all sorts of fun stuff, and just making people aware that we're there. We passed by several armed vehicles, National Guard, I believe, some police officers, things like that. Like there was a tank at one point, but I never felt like they were there to like break up what we were doing or anything like that. It made it, I didn't feel safer by their presence, but I also wasn't scared of their presence. Like I understood that they knew that this was going to be a large event and that the potential was there for something to happen, so I understood the need to have them there. But I didn't, some people when we were passing by would thank them, and some people passing by would like go and shake their hand. Some people just ignored them. I tried to keep my group together, honestly. So making sure that everyone was still there was sort of what I was focused on at that point.
Can you describe some of the other signs that you saw, or maybe some of the chants that y'all did?
There's always, this is what, or show me what democracy looks like, and this is what democracy looks like. We were doing that one a lot. There were, we would start up different ones every once in a while. I think that we didn't do too many chants on the way there. We did a few. One of the ones that we were sort of doing as a group, because we were a bus, was Georgia's 5th, represent. This is right after, John Lewis was sort of called out by another congressional member, so we felt that that was sort of important to make people aware that we're here, and we are with Georgia, and we're with John Lewis, and just following in his footsteps. Once we got there, once we got down to the mall area, we got sort of stuck in front of the Museum of the Native American. So we had sort of weaved our way over there, and the stage was sort of catty-corner to us. We couldn't hear anything. We couldn't move. There's people up in the trees. We'd pass phones up to them, and they'd take photos, and it was just a sea of people. And every once in a while, we got to the time point where we were supposed to be marching, and no one was moving, and we waited, and it was about 15 or 20 minutes after that, and people started chanting, "Let's march now." And I was like, what are they saying? what are they saying? And like it filtered back to us, and so we started it up too. And some people felt like that was rude, but at the same point in time, we had heard a lot of rumors, like again passed back through the grapevine of all of this spread of people, that they weren't going to let us march because there's too many people. At that point, prior to the march, they had said that there was going to be 250,000 or 500,000 people at the march. Somewhere in between there is what they were expecting, and there was over 1 million of us, easy. So we actually felt like it was important that they let us march, and so I don't know if that had an impact or anything, but it was probably about 45 minutes to an hour after the march was supposed to start that they actually had us reverse from where we were facing towards the Washington Monument. We reversed back towards the Capitol, walked across the mall, and then down Pennsylvania Avenue, which was not part of the march route. But we got to march, which was good. So once we reversed and sort of went back that way, once we started actually marching, we had a bunch of different things that were being chanted. We would do, we were actually behind a group of Latinas, and also there was some African American women, and they were doing Black Lives Matter, so we joined in with the Black Lives Matter chant. And since the march was pretty loose, right, you didn't stay in your squadron. Some people were marching faster than others, and since we were all trying to stay together, we would sort of be in a flux and flow of different groups of other people, which was great. So we had, again, show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. There was one, another chant that was right in front of the, I think it's the museum, the newspaper or news museum that we passed. We started one about like free the press, and there was something else about the media, because that's one of his things, right, is that fake news, and that's not a real thing. That fake news is a lie, right? He is a liar. So we would just do sort of situational chants as we went down, I guess, and we would pick up the call from anyone else that was starting one, and we would just keep it going.
So the media, when did you begin to realize or see on media that this was much bigger than anyone thought?
So when we were actually driving in on the bus, we were still probably about an hour out, and we were able to pick up the news stations on we had TVs on the bus that picked up local channels, and it had like a dish, I think. I'm not sure about the technology, but we were able to actually see the news, and we could see overhead shots of all the pink hats just sort of flooding the space, and we're like, this is a lot bigger than we thought it would be. I knew it was going to be big. I knew that there was going to be at least 500,000 people, but when we got there, I was like, this is a lot more people than they expected.
What'd that feel like?
I felt really good. I'm kind of sad that the other marches haven't been that large or well attended. I think that a lot of people went to the Women's March and they thought they did their job, and that they don't need to attend another one. And I think that that's not the case. I know that some of them are writing letters or phone, like calling, and I think that that's just as important. But the Women's March was not just about women. It was about a lot of different things, and I think that it's important that we all support each other, because if they divide us on different issues, that's dangerous. So.
What was it like on the bus on the way back?
We were all really tired. Since we weren't following one of the march route specifically, we ended up behind the White House somewhere, And we made our way back towards the Washington Monument, where we got to see all of the different signs. They had put out these walls, these temporary walls for you to hang your sign and leave it. And that's where they said that they were going to be collected for preservation for the Smithsonian, other places. And there was just plethora of signs, all sorts of different meanings, sayings, things like that. So we made our way back. We finally did a pit stop for the restroom, and we were walking back along the mall. We stopped to get something to eat because at that point in time we hadn't had anything to eat since we had gotten off the bus, except for like snack bars that we had brought with us. I think I had about a dozen granola bars that I had had in my pockets in the morning, and I was just passing them out all day long. So I stopped and I got a sandwich, and then we went back along the mall, and we got to see the sun setting behind the Capitol, and walked back to the bus pretty much in darkness. Since I was the bus captain, I didn't get to sit down. I was calling people to make sure that they were on their way back, that they hadn't gotten lost, that they hadn't like passed out, things like that. So they people started trickling in and sitting down. I would check them off, make sure that they knew to use the restroom, since our bus on the way down had a restroom in it, but it had gotten backed up, so they had locked it on the way back to Atlanta. So everyone had to use the restroom before we left. There was only like portal potties over there, so trying to get everyone organized and make sure that they had food, make sure that they had everything that they needed, and back on the bus. We got everyone back on. We were a little late getting out, but we headed out, and most people passed out. They just slept. We had a few stops in the middle of the night, so people would get up, and every time we would stop, I would have to wake up and check everyone back in, right? So count heads. And I got to the point that people were just like 9, 7, 24. I'm just like, thank you. That's not really helping, but thank you. So counting them all off and making sure that we didn't leave anyone at the rest stops was really important. Once we started rolling back into Atlanta, I felt that it was really important to share some more information with people. So we had, from the last stop to where we're rolling into Atlanta, I was trying to share information with them about the next steps. The Women's March website, I think at that point, had put up, like, these are the next 10 steps for the 100 days that we're going to be working on. So I made sure that people had access to that, make sure that they signed up for like the different Facebook things, or at least were made aware of them, and shared any other information that I had with them. I did encourage people to do, there was a lot of controversy right after. There was another organization that was trying to count how many women had participated in the march, any march, anywhere. And so there was a Google form or a text in that you say, I marched, or anything like that, and it would ask you where, and you'd say Washington, D.C. And I encouraged people to do that. Some people got freaked out because it wasn't put on by the Women's March on Washington. It was another women's group that was doing that. It's still legitimate. I personally thought that it was really important for us to be counted, because I think that a lot of people were looking at it as a reason to like shun what we were doing as a whole, like if it wasn't a good turnout. So I thought that it was important to be counted. Not so much for us to be able to say, like, I marched with X number of people, but to say, you know, this is how many people find this important enough to, you know, give up their weekend, give up their time, give up their money, to come, they give up their comfort physically to come over there. I think we ended up walking about 20 miles that day. So it was a lot. I think that we were on the bus for twice the amount of time that we were actually in the city, so it was good.
What do you hope will happen?
I hope that people will listen to each other more. I think that that's really important. Lots of people think that, you know, that there's nothing to be gained by having a discussion with a person that thinks differently upon a certain issue, be it abortion or be it, rights of LGBTQ folks, just rights of anyone, I guess. But I think that it's more important than ever that we continue to have these conversations, because nothing's going to change if we don't talk to one another. Yeah, I think that that's really it. I'd really like to see a lot more bipartisan issues be brought up and followed through upon, and some sort of progress made on these things. Because right now I think that we are struggling to come up with a new American identity. So much has happened in the past 50 years, even in the past 20 years, and a lot of folks are still clinging to this ideal America that was like post-World War II, and that doesn't exist. That is not reality. And I think that most people know that. They just don't always acknowledge it. So I think it's important for folks to talk to one another. You don't have to agree with what everyone's saying. Like, that's fine. It's not about agreeing with folks just for agreeing. It's about listening to their side and understanding where they're coming from, and really understanding why you believe a thing and why they believe a thing. Because it's really easy for me to judge someone because I haven't lived their life. It's really easy for someone else to judge me because they haven't lived mine. I think that I had a really good discussion with one of my friend's sisters on abortion. Abortion is murder, is what she told me, and I was a murderer for endorsing it. And I said, I think that it's more important to focus on the lives that are here today and the well-being of people here. And if a mother can't afford to make that child's, sustain life for that child, then how is that any different? And that made her think that these people that are choosing abortion don't always have the means to follow through with something that they have started. So that was sort of maybe not a breakthrough moment, because I still think that she's not for it. She's not going to ever be that way, I don't think, just for religious reasons. But at the same time, I think that it made her think about an issue less in black and white and more in shades of gray. Because you don't ever know someone's life. You don't ever know what situations have brought them to where they are today. A lot of it's choice, but a lot of it is also, things that are beyond your control. So I think that sort of opened her eyes. And hopefully that will continue to help her think about ways in other situations. So.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear? Oh, there's a lot. I'm really fearful that some of the progress that has been made, especially in LGBTQ rights, environmental, that those are going to get rolled back. And I think that that's a very real fear, honestly. The things that especially male politicians are saying, and that some female politicians are following them up on and saying, yes, this is okay to say that, women don't need access to birth control. Women don't need to be able to have the right to have an abortion. That's terrifying to me, because those procedures and those medical things give us control over our own bodies. And there's so many situations where you need those to survive. You don't always have, access to these things. I understand that sometimes people just don't have medical facility nearby where that need can be filled, and that's really sad. But to have autonomy over your own body and control over your own body is really important, and that's something that I don't think that they understand. One, because they're male, and they've never had to think about every single situation that they're in. They've never had to think about the safety of themselves. So that's kind of frustrating. I think that especially in regards to that, like, so many women are vulnerable to rape, to, situations where, it might be consensual sex, but, the condom breaks, or they didn't take their birth control like they should have, and they get in a situation where, they have to make a choice, and while that's upsetting and can be confusing to not have access to doctors to talk about that and talk it through, that's just absurd. It's 2017. Come on.
Let me,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
could go back to the march,
Yeah.
excuse me, what stood out the most for you about the march?
People were very sharing. Like, I was sharing my granola bars. People were passing back and forth. They had Camelbacks or bottles of water. People were very open with each other. There was conversations about, well, where are you from? Things like that, just talking back and forth. People exchanging numbers. Someone had passed their phone up to the loraxes in the trees taking photos. I said, can you text that to me? And she said, sure. She's like, it probably won't go through, but I'll try to send it afterwards. And I didn't hear back from her personally until about 2 weeks after, and she sent me the photo, and I was like, thank you. Thank you. And we had a whole text conversation. It was me and this other girl that had asked for the photo and the owner of the phone that had been passed up. And it's these connections were made, and it may not be a sustained connection, but at the same time, that there's another person out there that had the same experience as you, that has this thing that they believe in. And so you're not alone. I think that it's really easy to feel isolated, especially in a big city like Atlanta, that you're not making a difference, or that what you're doing is not having an impact. But then you think about all of these other women that went back and that were on the bus with you or were at the march with you, that are doing this thing too. So you're not alone.
For people who are trying to cope in a situation like this where the government, it seems, non-responsive, and who have gathered together to march and raise their voice, do you have any advice after this experience on how they can cope?
Keep doing everything that you're doing. It'll make a difference eventually. They can't ignore us forever. I think that was one of the chants that we were doing was, Donald Trump, hear us roar, 1 million women at your door. Can't ignore us anymore. And I think that that's really important. They can't ignore us forever. Just keep doing what you're doing, and it's going to make a difference. Eventually we can vote out all of the bastards. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to, is making this an issue continually and telling them that we're not going to shut up, that we're not going to just quietly sit down and take what they've been giving us, that we're going to demand more from them, and that that's their job, is to listen to us. I got an email, I've sent emails, and I've phone called the senators and John Lewis. Usually when I call John Lewis's office, I just thank him. Thank you for, making this a priority. Thank you for, listening to us. But when I call Isaacson's office or Perdue's office, both the senators from Georgia, I usually get the message machine, so it's not as satisfying maybe. But I also don't have to listen to them talk back like I've heard from some other people they do. But when I sent an email out about the Health Care Act that he was voting on, or getting ready to vote on, I had a very personal connection to the ACA. When the ACA came out, and once I had transferred over from my parents' healthcare after I turned 26, I was working a part-time job. I didn't have a lot of money. I had to have health care at that point in time, so I swapped over to ACA care, and I fell into the gap from Georgia not expanding their Medicare system. And since I wasn't a habitual drug user, and I didn't have anyone dependent upon me, I didn't qualify for the state care program. And they said, well, congratulations, you don't have to have any sort of medical stuff for this year. And I said, I still want it. So I had to pay out of pocket the entire amount, and I got no sort of tax credits or anything to help support that. So that was about $250, I believe, or $300 a month that I paid for a silver level plan because I felt that it was important for me to have that, and it's good that I did. Had an emergency room visit due to, they call it gastritis. It's basically like you are continually vomiting for about 12 hours, and so you have to have medication to help you stop that. And it's sort of like food poisoning. Basically, you've eaten something that your system can't handle. So I had to go in and I got a Sonicare because I thought that at first it was my gallbladder, and that ended up being about a $3,000 to $4,000 emergency room visit. So without that medical care, I would have been in a bad place. Financially, it was still pretty hard because my deductible at that time I think was still like $1,000. So, and since my emergency room doctor was out of network, even though I had no say over who I got as my doctor, that was another cost that was completely not covered, or only covered to a certain extent by my medical care program. But regardless, I still think that ACA was really important. It saved me a lot of money because that would be just a lot more expensive had I not had it. And then when I re-upped for the second year, since I was still working only part-time and I still didn't make a lot of money and I wasn't offered a healthcare program through work. And when I re-upped, I actually got the tax credits because I had actually gone up a tax bracket, or had gone up in the amount of money that I was bringing in, so that I actually finally qualified for the tax credits. That brought down my payments from like $300 to about $75, I think, which made a huge difference in my quality of life. So, same plan, same deductible, but it just made a big difference. And you know what? When people are talking about the ACA, like it's this horrible thing that we're, making it so people can abuse the system or game it in some way, and it's like, no, it's helping people like me that are, like millennials, or however you want to think about us, where we came out of school and we're in the midst of a depression and we have no way of finding full-time work because those jobs just don't exist. And so you're putting together part-time jobs, you're living at your parents', you're, doing all these things that you didn't think that you'd be doing, so you can like have some semblance of normalcy and feel like an adult. And that's when I sort of get really angry with people when they start judging me and other people that are on this system based on these false ideas of what it means. And I've met a lot of people that, the ACA helped them, medically. It improved their quality of life. A lot of folks said that if they didn't have it, they wouldn't be able to work. Like, there's just, yeah. So Isaacson sent me back a nice reply to this email that I sent him, detailing this experience that I had and why universal healthcare is so important. And it's so important to support that system as a whole and make sure that everyone has it because it's something that you need. in your day-to-day life, especially if you're coming out and you're still struggling because the economy is crap. And he sent back a very nice reply that was basically F you. And I voted this way because I think it's, more important that we be fiscally conservative and put that money to better use in the military. So, just keep at it. They will eventually either be worn down and open their eyes, or we'll vote them out.
So, what advice would you give to someone considering about doing a march in the future?
Plan it really well. Give yourself enough time to plan it really well. I think that it's easy to want to be reactionary, and I think that that's great and it has a time and a place, but for the larger issues, it's really important that you get the people together that you are going to help organize it with you, and plan for every contingency, and make sure that the people that are like bringing busloads of people know where they're supposed to go, have all of that information, so they're not like me standing in front of my bus and saying, literally, this is everything I know. You can ask me questions, and I'll probably say, I don't know. If you have a question, I'll check on it, and I'll see if anyone else knows in my bus captain group. But we're kind of all in the same boat in that we don't know anything. So we're just going to take it and fly by the seat of our pants, and we'll see where we end up.
So before we wrap it up,
Yeah.
I know we're short on time, I want to give you this opportunity to talk about anything that we didn't get a chance to discuss so far. Anything about the march or the issues or your overall general sense of the value of the march?
I think that the value of it was sort of that it wasn't just a standalone event. It's inspired a lot of other marches. It inspired me personally to actually go to a lot of other marches. I never thought of myself as an activist, and I never thought that I would be putting myself out there as an activist, which that's just, I'm an introvert. I like to stay at home. I will call, I will write, but it's like, putting myself out there. But I've joined a lot of groups. I've met a lot of individuals. I've done a bunch of different trainings now, all because I went to that march, and all because I put myself out there. And I think that that's really important, that this event has inspired a whole new generation of women especially, and not just people that may have political leanings one way or another, but just everyone that was there. Like, you didn't have to be a Democrat, you didn't have to be a Republican, you don't have to be anything to believe in a thing, right? Like, what you believe politically or a political affiliation doesn't have to define what you are, who you are. So I think that march sort of has inspired myself, other people. I've gone to several rallies here in Atlanta. I went for the Atlanta March for Science more recently, I guess, and some other marches here, and those have been really rewarding. Again, some of them could have been organized a little better, and I think that that's something that it's still struggling with, is not just getting the word out, because I think that's the easy part, is getting a following, getting it out there on social media for people to pick up. But I think that it's harder to make sure that people know where the restrooms are, and people have chants that they can start up at any time. The Science March was hard for the chants. But yeah, it's also taught me to be really prepared, because I lost my voice after the Women's March from chanting so loud. And that's also something that I sort of learned about myself, is that I'm not a really loud person until I get in that sort of setting. And then, since no one else was being the chant leader. Like there's usually a person that does the call, that is the one that says, show me what democracy looks like, and then everyone else is the one, this is what democracy looks like. No one was for our like area was saying that, and so I said, I'm gonna do it. And I did it, and one of the other girls that I had actually just met from like on the bus was like, I totally did not peg you for being that loud. I was like, I'm not usually, but needs must. So I feel like that's something that was really a positive thing that I learned about myself, is that I can be loud when I need to be. And just because I'm loud doesn't mean that I'm being listened to, but I thought that was important for us to be heard. So.
I can't think of a better way to close this interview. Thank you, Erica Hague. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yep.
I think this is so important, and I'm glad you shared your experiences with us today.
Thank you.